The geographical enclave now known as Nigeria used to be a conglomeration of kingdoms, fiefdoms, emirate councils, and semi-republican entities. The country consists of over 250 ethnic groups, prominent among which are Yoruba in the southwestern part, Igbo, Efik, Ibibio, Ishekiris, and Benins in the south-south and southeastern part, Hausa Fulani in the core north, Kanuris and Shua Arabs in the northeast, Igala and Lantan in the north-central, among others. If democracy is government by representation with responsibility to the mass of the people, each of these groups had semblance of democratic principles in their various systems of government prior to the arrival of colonialism. For instance, in the southwest, the Yoruba Kingdom of Oyo, which was founded around 1400 at its height from the 17th to 19th centuries, attained a high level of political systems starting from compounds made up of households and township structures with the kings presiding. These kings are responsible to superior authorities who presided over what can be termed the vassal states of Oyo. The final authorities resided in the Alaafin of Oyo and his Council of Oyomesi. This is a semblance of today's local governments, states, and federal authorities in the Nigerian nation. In the south-central part of present-day Nigeria, as early as the 15th and 16th centuries, the Kingdom of Benin had developed an efficient army and an elaborate ceremonial court. In the early 19th century, the Fulani leader Usman Dan Fodio promulgated Islam and brought most areas in the north under the loose control of an empire centered in Sokoto. In 1885, British claims to a sphere of the interior part of today's Nigeria received international recognition, and in the following year, the Royal Niger Company was chartered. In 1900, the company's territory came under the control of the British government, which moved to consolidate its hold over the area of modern Nigeria. In 1914, the area north and south of Nigeria was formally united as a colony and the protectorate of Nigeria. Administratively, Nigeria remained divided into the northern and southern provinces and Lagos colony. Hugh Clifford, constitution enacted in 1922, prepared the ground for the first step towards representative government in Nigeria. Political parties are essential ingredient of democracy. It was after the enactment of Clifford's constitution that the first political party in Nigeria, Nigerian National Democratic Party, NNDP of Abat Macaulay, came into existence on 14th January 1923. This was followed by the first democratic election in Nigeria's political annals. The landmark event was the first election into the House of Representatives on September 20, 1923. There was a lull in democratic activities between 1923 and 1934 when Ernest Ikoli and others formed the Lagos Youth Movement, LYM, which transformed into Nigerian Youth Movement, NYM, in 1938. The colony and protectorate of southern Nigeria split into east and west in 1939, while in 1944, National Council of Nigeria and Cameroon, NCNC, was born, while the Northern Elements People's Union, NEPO, came on stream on August 8, 1950. Action Group of Chief Obafemi Awolowo followed on March 21, 1951, and Northern People's Congress, NPC, emerged in October 1951. Along these political activities was agitation for freedom from the colonial masters, leading to the enactment of various constitutions. The last of such constitutions that made it possible for the emergence of Nigerians as leaders of government business in the country's 3 regions then was the Macpherson Constitution. The coming into effect of the Constitution produced Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe as leader of government business in the Eastern region, Chief Obafemi Awolowo in the Western region, and Sir Ahmadu Bello in the Northern region in 1957. East and West became self-governing even as Alhaji Abubakar Tafawa Balewa was appointed first Federal Prime Minister. Northern region became self-governing in 1959. What could be termed as the first general elections in Nigeria held the same year. The outcome of the elections returned Tafawa Balewa as Prime Minister as NCNC and NPC enter into a working alliance at the federal level. Nigeria was granted full independence in October 1960 as a federation of 3 regions, Northern, Western, and Eastern, under a constitution that provided for a parliamentary form of government. Under the constitution, each of these 3 regions retained a substantial measure of self-government. The federal government was given exclusive powers in defense and security, foreign relations, and commercial and fiscal policies. In October 1963, Nigeria altered its relationship with the United Kingdom by proclaiming itself a federal republic and promulgating a new constitution. A 4th region, the Midwest, was established that year. On January 15, 1966, a small group of army officers, mostly southeastern Igbos, overthrew the government and assassinated the federal prime minister and the premiers of the northern and western regions. The federal military government that assumed power was unable to calm ethnic tensions or produce a constitution acceptable to all sections of the country. In fact, its efforts to abolish the federal structure greatly raised tensions and led to another coup in July. The coup brought into power Lieutenant Colonel, later General Yakubu Gowon as head of state. The coup-related massacre of thousands of Igbos in the north prompted hundreds of thousands of them to return to the southeast, where increasingly strong Igbo secessionist sentiment emerged. In a move that gave greater autonomy to minority ethnic groups, the military divided the 4 regions into 12 states. The Igbo rejected attempts at constitutional revisions and insisted on full autonomy for the East. Finally, in May 1967, Lieutenant Colonel Emeka Odumegu Ojukwu, the military governor of the Eastern region, who emerged as the leader of increasing Igbo secessionist sentiment, declared the independence of the Eastern region as the Republic of Biafra. The ensuing civil war was bitter and bloody, ending in the defeat of Biafra in 1970.
And we have with us today Colonel Obasanjo, and unfortunately the other field commanders are not able to be with us at this moment. But we have Colonel Obasanjo, who is the commander of 3 Marine Commando, who have been able to capture a number of senior secessionist officers, and he had brought them to Lagos to see us in order to let us have their acceptance of the spirit of one Nigeria.
Formally give up secession and report for reappointment and redeployment. Philip Effiong.
Your Excellency.
Glad to see you again.
My pleasure.
How are you?
Very well indeed.
Glad to see you again. Thank you.
Patrick Amadi.
How are you?
Excellency.
Glad to see you again.
Thank you very much.
Glad to see you again.
It's an experience.
Honestly. Glad to see you again.
And I would like, therefore, to take this opportunity to say that I, Major General Philip Effiong, officer administering the government of the Republic of Biafra, now wish to make the following declaration. That we affirm we are loyal Nigerian citizens and accept the authority of the Federal Military Government of Nigeria. That we accept the existing administrative and political structure of the Federation of Nigeria. That any future constitutional arrangement will be worked out by representatives of the people of Nigeria. That the Republic of Biafra hereby ceases to exist.
On July 29, 1975, a group of military officers staged a bloodless coup, accusing the military government of General Yakubu Gowon of delaying the promised return to civilian rule and becoming corrupt and ineffective. General Murtala Muhammad, who emerged as head of state, announced a timetable for the resumption of civilian rule by October 1979.
Fellow Nigerians, events of the past few years have indicated that despite our great human and material resources, the government has not been able to fulfill the legitimate expectations of our people. Nigeria has been left to drift. This situation, if not arrested, would inevitably have resulted in chaos and even bloodshed.
General Muhammad was assassinated on February 13, 1976, in an abortive coup. His chief of staff, Lieutenant General Olusegun Obasanjo, became head of state.
The Supreme Military Council has been meeting to consider, among other things, the conclusions of the military tribunal appointed by the federal military government to try those involved in the abortive coup of 13th February. The Council has confirmed the sentences passed by the tribunal. Those condemned to death by firing squad have been executed today. These include Lieutenant Colonel B.S. Dimka and Mr. J.D. Gumwalk, two of the principal actors of the abortive coup.
Obasanjo adhered meticulously to the schedule for return to civil rule, moving to modernize and streamline the armed forces and seeking to use oil revenues to diversify and develop the country's economy. A Constituent Assembly was elected in 1977 to draft a new constitution, which was published on September 21, 1978, when the ban on political activity in effect since the advent of military rule was lifted. Political parties were formed and candidates were nominated for president and vice president, the two houses of the National Assembly, governorships, and state houses of assembly. In 1979, 5 political parties competed in a series of elections in which a northerner, Alhaji Shehu Shagari, of the National Party of Nigeria, NPN, was elected president. In August 1983, Shagari and the NPN were returned to power in what was described by the NPN as a landslide victory, with a majority of seats in the National Assembly and control of 12 state governments. But the elections were marred by violence and allegations of widespread vote rigging and electoral malpractices led to legal battles over the results. On December 31, 1983, the military overthrew the Second Republic. Major General Muhammad Buhari emerged as the leader of the Supreme Military Council, SMC, the country's new ruling body. He charged the civilian government with economic mismanagement, widespread corruption, election fraud, and a general lack of concern for the problems of Nigerians.
We intend to hold the leadership until we are satisfied.
The Buhari government was peacefully overthrown by the SMC's third-ranking member, Army Chief of Staff Major General Ibrahim Babangida, in August 1985. Babangida cited the misuse of power, violations of human rights by key officers of the SMC, and the government's failure to deal with the country's deepening economic crisis as justifications for the takeover. President Babangida promised to return the country to civilian rule by 1990. This date was later extended until January 1993. In early 1989, a Constituent Assembly completed work on Constitution for the Third Republic. In the spring of 1989, political activity was again permitted. In October 1989, the government established 2 grassroots parties, the National Republican Convention, NRC, which was to be a little to the right, and the Social Democratic Party, SDP, a little to the left. Other parties were not allowed to register by the Babangida government. In April 1990, mid-level officers attempted to overthrow the Babangida government. The coup failed, and 69 accused coup plotters were later executed after secret trials before military tribunals. The transition resumed after the failed coup. In December 1990, the first stage of partisan election was held at the local government level. While turnout was low, there was no violence, and both parties demonstrated strength in all regions of the country, with the SDP winning control of a majority of local government councils. In December 1991, gubernatorial and state legislative elections were held throughout the country. Babangida decreed in December 1991 that previously banned politicians would be allowed to contest in primaries scheduled for August 1992. These were cancelled due to fraud, and subsequent primaries scheduled for September also were cancelled. All announced candidates were disqualified from again standing for president once a new election format was selected. The presidential election was finally held on June 12, 1993, with the inauguration of the new president scheduled to take place August 27, 1993, the 8th anniversary of President Babangida's coming to power. In the historic June 12, 1993 presidential elections, which most observers deemed to be Nigeria's fairest, early returns indicated that wealthy Yoruba businessman MKO Abiola had won a decisive victory. However, on June 23, Babangida, using several pending lawsuits as a pretense, annulled the election, throwing Nigeria into turmoil.
It is true that the presidential election was generally seen to be free, fair, and peaceful. However, there was in fact a huge array of electoral malpractices virtually in all the states of the Federation before the actual voting began.
More than 100 persons were killed in riots before Babangida agreed to hand over power to an interim government on August 27, 1993. Babangida then attempted to renege on his decision. Without popular and military support, he was forced to hand over to Ernest Shonekan, a prominent, non-partisan businessman. Shonekan was to rule until new elections scheduled for February 1994. Although he had led Babangida's transitional council since early 1993, Shonekan was unable to reverse Nigeria's ever-growing economic problems or to defuse lingering political tensions. With the country sliding into chaos, Defense Minister Sani Abacha quickly assumed power and forced Shonekan's resignation on November 17, 1993. Abacha dissolved all democratic political institutions and replaced elected governors with military officers.
Ernest Shonekan took over as head of state and commander-in-chief of the Nigerian Armed Forces at the most trying time in the history of our country. Politically, economically, and socially, there were lots of uncertainties. Things appeared bleak, and the atmosphere was heavy with uncertainties. However, driven by the belief in himself, his countrymen, and love for his country, he accepted to face the challenges of our time. I would therefore like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to him for his selfless service to the nation. Consequently, the following decisions come into immediate effect. The interim national government is hereby dissolved. The national and state assemblies are also dissolved. The state executive councils are dissolved. The brigade commanders are to take over from the governors in their states until administrators are appointed. Where there are no brigade commanders, the commissioners of police in the states are to take over. All local governments stand dissolved. The directors of personnel are to take over the administration of the local government until administrators are appointed. The National Electoral Commission is hereby dissolved. All former secretaries to federal ministries are to hand over to their director generals until ministers are appointed. The two political parties are hereby dissolved. All processions, political meetings, and associations of any type in any part of the country are hereby banned. Any consultative committee, by whatever name called, is hereby proscribed. Decree 61 of 1993 is hereby abrogated. The Provisional Ruling Council is hereby established.
Abacha promised to return the government to civilian rule, but refused to announce the timetable until his October 1, 1995 Independence Day address. Although Abacha's takeover was initially welcomed by many Nigerians, disenchantment grew rapidly. A number of opposition figures united to form a new organization, the National Democratic Coalition, NADECO, which campaigned for an immediate return to civilian rule. The government arrested NADECO members who attempted to reconvene the Senate and other disbanded democratic institutions. Most Nigerians boycotted the elections held from May 23 to 28, 1994 for delegates to the government-sponsored Constitutional Conference. On June 11, 1994, using the groundwork laid by NADECO, Abiola declared himself president and went into hiding.
No one has accused me of any offense against any known electoral law or regulation. The people of this country went to polls on Saturday, June 12, 1993. and without let or hindrance chose me as their president. Didn't they? The figures say so. The agencies of government, MAMSA, CDS, Presidential Election Monitoring Group also says so. The International Observer Group said so. In its affidavit to the Court of Appeal in Kaduna, NEC said the results were already unknown. I won. Yet, the federal military government, on the most unconvincing and disingenuous premise that the judiciary caught itself in a cobweb of ludicrous contradiction, had decided to cancel the election and its results. I say categorically that this decision is unfair, unjust, and consequently unacceptable. Prior to June 12, 1993, it was possible for the federal military government to claim that those who spoke their mind and opposed its policies represented nobody by themselves and were self-appointed critics who had no mandate from the people of this country. That situation changed on June 12. As I speak today, and by the unveiling grace of Almighty God and the wishes of the people of this country, the President-elect of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and the custodian of a sacred mandate freely given, which I cannot surrender unless the people so demand. And it is by virtue of this mandate that I say that the decision of the federal military government to cancel the election of June 12 is invidious, unpatriotic, and capable of causing undue and unnecessary confusion in the country, and therefore repugnant to every right-thinking Nigerian. I therefore call on all our people who have yearned and worked for a speedy return of our beloved country to civilian democracy to reject any act by anybody which takes away their inalienable and fundamental human right to decide who governs them. No other institution or group can confer legitimacy of the presidency except through a free and fair election throughout Nigeria based on universal adult suffrage, such as the one in which I was elected president. I also call on the international community and all democratic forces to stand by the Nigerian people in our just struggle for democracy, freedom, and justice in our fatherland. They are already in total support of democracy in this country. From now on, the struggle in Nigeria is between the people and a small clique in the military determined to cling to power at all costs. We are fully convinced that a majority of the armed forces are law-abiding and wish for Nigeria to become a democratic nation. We have a record of all the votes in all the military cantonments in Nigeria. They all came out overwhelmingly to vote, themselves and their family, and they voted overwhelmingly for me, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It is inconceivable that a few people in government should claim to know so much better about politics and government in our country than the 14 million Nigerians who actually went to the polls on June 12. It is gratuitous insult to suppose that any government, no matter how impressed it is by its own knowledge and wisdom, should, against the people's will, continue to make laws and regulations whose only permanent characteristic is inconsistency. This country is tired of their inconsistency. The people of Nigeria have spoken. Unfortunately, apparently, what the people said was not what they wanted to hear. It was tough luck for them. It is the people's voice that will be heard and will be heard and will be heard again. They have loudly and firmly proclaimed their preference for democracy. They have chosen me as their president for the next 4 years. They have determined that August 27, 1993 shall be the terminal date of military dictatorship in Nigeria. On that date, the people of Nigeria, through their democratic decision of June 12, 1993, expect to assume the reins of government. I fully intend to keep that date with history.
He re-emerged and was promptly arrested on June 23. With Abiola in prison and tempers rising Abacha convened the Constitutional Conference June 27, but it almost immediately went into recess and did not reconvene until July 11, 1994. On July 4, a petroleum workers' union called a strike demanding that Abacha release Abiola and hand over power to him. Other unions then joined the strike, which brought economic life in around Lagos areas and in much of the southwest to a standstill. After calling off a threatened general strike in July, the Nigerian Labour Congress (NLC) reconsidered a general strike in August after the government imposed conditions on Abiola's release. On August 17, 1994, the government dismissed the leadership of the NLC, and the petroleum unions placed the unions under appointed administrators and arrested Frank Kokori and other labor leaders. Although striking unions returned to work, the government arrested opponents, closed media houses, and moved strongly to curb dissent. The government alleged in early 1995 that some 40 military officers and civilians were engaged in a coup plot. Security officers quickly rounded up the accused, including former head of state Obasanjo and his erstwhile deputy, retired General Shehu Musa Yaradua. After a secret tribunal, most of the accused were convicted and several death sentences were handed down. The tribunal also charged, convicted, and sentenced prominent human rights activists, journalists, and others, including relatives of the coup suspects, for their alleged anti-regime activities. In October, the government announced that the Provisional Ruling Council and Abacha had approved final sentences for those convicted of participation in the coup plot. In an October 1, 1995 address to the nation, General Sani Abacha announced the timetable for a 3-year transition to civilian rule. Only 5 of the political parties which applied for registration were approved by the regime. In local elections held in December 1997, turnout was under 10%. By the April 1998 State Assembly and gubernatorial elections, all 5 of the approved parties had nominated Abacha as the presidential candidate in controversial party conventions. Public reaction to this development in the transition program was apathy and a near complete boycott of the elections. On December 21, 1997, the government announced the arrest of the country's second highest-ranking military officer, Chief of General Staff, Lieutenant General Ladipo Dia, 10 other officers, and 8 civilians on charges of coup plotting. Subsequently, the government arrested a number of additional persons for roles in the purported coup plot and tried the accused before a closed-door military tribunal in April, in which Dia and 8 others were sentenced to death. Abacha, widely expected to succeed himself as a civilian president on October 1, 1998, remained head of state until his death on June 8 of that year. Babangida's transition program will always be remembered in Nigeria's democratic annals as the longest ever, while that of Abacha the bloodiest. Hundreds of innocent citizens, scores of pro-democracy activists, a number of journalists, and social crusaders lost their lives during Abacha's transition program. Prominent among these were Alfred Rwani, Suliat Adedeji, Bagauda Kalto, Shehu Musa Yaradua, Kudirat Abiola, and the symbol of June 12 himself, Chief Mashood Kashimawu Olawale Abiola. Abacha was replaced by General Abdulsalami Abubakar, who had been third in command until the arrest of Dia. The PRC, under new head of state Abubakar, commuted the sentences of those accused in the alleged 1997 coup in July 1998. In March 1999, Dia and 54 others accused of or convicted of participation in coups in 1990, 1995, and 1997 were released. Following the death of the former head of state, Abacha, in June, Nigeria released almost all known civilian political detainees, including the Ogoni 19. In August 1998, the Abubakar's government appointed the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, to conduct elections for local government councils, state legislatures, and governors, the National Assembly, and President. INEC successfully held these elections on December 5, 1998, January 9, 1999, February 20, and February 27, 1999. A total of 9 parties were granted provisional registration, with 3 fulfilling the requirements to contest the following elections. These parties were the People's Democratic Party, PDP, the All People's Party, APP, and the Alliance for Democracy, AD. Former military head of state Olusegun Obasanjo, freed from prison by Abubakar, ran as a civilian candidate and won the presidential election. Irregularities made the vote, and the defeated candidate Chief Olufalaye challenged electoral results and Obasanjo's victory in court. The PRC promulgated a new constitution based largely on the suspended 1979 constitution before the May 29, 1999 inauguration of the new civilian president. The constitution includes provisions for a bicameral legislature, the National Assembly consisting of a 360-member House of Representatives and a 109-member Senate. The executive branch and the office of President will retain strong federal powers. The emergence of a democratic Nigeria in May 1999 ended 16 years of consecutive military rule. Olusegun Obasanjo became the steward of a country suffering economic stagnation and the deterioration of most of its democratic institutions.
The Federal Republic of Nigeria.
So help me God.
So help me God. Well-being.
Excellency now signs and recognized. And for other aspects of the handing over ceremony.
Obasanjo, a former general, was admired for his stand against the Abacha dictatorship, his record of returning the federal government to civilian rule in 1979, and his claim to represent all Nigerians regardless of religion. The new president took over a country that faced many problems, including a dysfunctional bureaucracy, collapsed infrastructure, and a military that wanted a reward for returning quietly to the barracks. The president moved quickly and retired hundreds of military officers who held political positions, established a blue ribbon panel to investigate human rights violations, and ordered the release of scores of persons held without charge. Olusegun Obasanjo ruled for 8 years of 2 terms as president of Nigeria. However, the sore point of his administration was his attempt to elongate his presidency through a 3rd term of office, which was eventually scuttled. Umar Musa Yar'Adua was elected and took office as President, Federal Republic of Nigeria on May 29, 2007, along with the incumbent Dr. Goodluck Jonathan as Vice President in a widely flawed presidential election. Alhaji Umar Yar'Adua took ill while in office and later joined the League of Nigerian Leaders who died in office. A constitutional crisis ensued between the period of his illness and eventual death. The National Assembly had to adopt the principle of necessity before the then Vice President, Goodluck Jonathan, could take over as the acting president. He assumed full presidency later after the death of Umar Yar'Adua. Dr. Jonathan contested in 2011 and won an election rated as better than that of 2007.
I, Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, do solemnly swear and affirm that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and that I will preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So help me God.
After the return to democratic rule in 1999, the National Assembly was crisis-ridden. There were a series of changes in the headship of both AIMS and also their principal officers. However, the situation has improved considerably. The judiciary has also played prominent roles in the sustenance of Nigeria's democracy with a number of landmark judgments. As Nigeria marks the 14th anniversary of unbroken democratic rule, the heat is already on for the next series of elections in some states in 2014 and the general one in 2015. Efforts are on to review the 1999 Constitution to make it serve the purpose of democracy better. With the acceptance of the military of their traditional role of defending the country's territorial integrity and resolve never to dabble into politics, there is hope that if the political class gets its acts together, Nigeria's nascent democracy will not only grow but also be sustained. Special thanks to the producer of this special documentary on the history of democracy in Nigeria, Akinola Owolabi, for his painstaking efforts in putting together all necessary materials that make the package a reality. Dari Aroshafe also played a commendable role. My name is Adejumoke Akinjiola. God bless Nigeria.